Over the past few conversations, we've heard from end users, solution providers, and other influencers who are creating or using technologies that are driving industrial transformation. Today, we're taking a step back to get a broader perspective. Joining us is Andrew Zignani, Senior Research Director at ABI Research. Andrew focuses on wireless connectivity on ABI's Strategic Technologies team. He's closely involved in the research and forecasting that track how these technologies are evolving and how they're starting to shape productivity and efficiency across industrial environments. Hello again, Andrew. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, hi Dave. Great to be here. It's great to connect with you guys again on another Bluetooth topic. Obviously, Bluetooth's doing so many different things and so many different success stories across the board. So it's great to be able to share some more insight, on this side of things as well.
You've been through this drill before. So as you know, we usually start by asking a totally absurd question, just for kind of grins and giggles. Are you game to do it again?
I can't wait.
So Andrew, your question is, would you rather have socks that play theme music when you walk or glasses that narrate your thoughts in a dramatic voice?
Definitely the first one. Definitely the first. If you can customize a song, right, to something cool, not just like a weird trumpet sound or something, like a comedy sketch or something like that, or like the Benny Hill theme or something like that. But no, the narration of thoughts would just be too scary. I'm sure that'd be the same for most people, right? And I'm not sure, especially with some privacy issues, that it won't be hacked or something. So that's even more of a concern, to be honest with you. So I'll go for the socks, right? Especially if they're fresh and you can get a new pair every day or something. So that's always good.
All right, I like that answer. By the way, I really appreciated the Benny Hill reference because I'm old enough to get it, and you don't hear it often. Not often enough, probably.
Yeah, I'm definitely showing my age again, as always.
Now for the really fun stuff. So from a macro perspective, how big a constraint is industrial productivity becoming?
Yeah, so I think it's clearly huge, and I think even recent political things and everything you've seen around the globe at the moment is kind of exacerbating things. But yeah, generally speaking, of course, various manufacturing, industrial, logistical organizations, we see they're continually squeezed by a number of different pressures, the economic, geopolitical. There's a lot of supply chain issues, different regulations across, moving towards sustainability. Obviously, you have the labor market challenges, inflation, different technology pressures as companies invest more in digitalization. And as I said, we're seeing things like obviously trade disputes in recent years, the tariffs impacting things, different regional conflicts, which of course are ongoing now as well. Even the wireless connectivity market was disrupted recently with some of the inventory challenges. So, knowing what you have, and now with obviously things like memory shortages as well, we expect that to increase, energy supply as well. So all of these different factors are, of course, increase the need for the investment in digitalization from these enterprises. There needs to be, enhanced visibility across different areas. There's, the move towards, more compliant procedures across different environments, more sustainable supply chains. All these are compounding, really. So there is not one driving factor, I would say, but I think the pressures are definitely growing, and I think it's becoming extremely acute for these organizations to invest more in the transformation of their enterprises, going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned it's not one thing, it's a combination of things. I am curious, though, if you could maybe poke at, where's the largest friction, or where's the largest opportunity? When you think about the parts of the industrial ecosystem and across the supply chain, where might be, where's the most pressure and where's the most opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a few. I think the first would be the kind of wider supply chain visibility aspect. So not just knowing or not just knowing where things end up as such, which has been a typical challenge, but also knowing what your supply of the raw materials is. Right? Is it the right actual equipment? Is it being sourced from the right place? Enabling things like just-in-time production is extremely critical. I think the second point is obviously on the compliance side of things as well. Not just from a worker safety perspective, but also being able to monitor and record different production activities, ensuring that the right component is being used at the right time by the right person on the right piece of machinery. We've seen various challenges where there's kind of counterfeiting in the supply chain that's caused some problems with component sourcing as well. So that's a huge issue for things like aviation safety, of course, as well, which has been a challenge. The third is obviously, I think, labor shortages as well, especially across different regions where there may be higher labor costs in particular as well. So What we see at the moment is a transformation where a lot of the younger staff are older staff are moving on, but the younger staff not necessarily there with the expertise to replace them as well, which is obviously pushing the need for more automation going forward. Cybersecurity is, of course, a huge barrier, a huge challenge, but also a big opportunity in enabling kind of greater monitoring of the assets, but also the supply chain, also ensuring that these things that are connected are going to be secure going forward as well. And then this overall improving, not just effectively doing more with less, right? So improving the yield of the different, what you're producing, of course, making sure it's of the right quality, optimizing the different processes as well, and basically having greater visibility and enabling greater intelligence throughout, the whole supply chain effectively.
You briefly mentioned regions. I'm curious, are there particular regions where the productivity challenges are becoming especially acute?
Yeah, I think obviously it's a global issue, and I think obviously there'll be some different dynamics depending on specific events in those regions, of course, and we see that with energy at the moment. But I think in areas where there are perhaps a higher labour cost is a particular challenge as well, and maybe there isn't necessarily as great education and training in a kind of transition towards digitalisation as well. So I think that's a key element. So how you maximize the not just the utility or the kind of resources of your staff and availability, but also ensure they're working safely in the right environment. They're kind of as efficient as possible, but they're also kind of satisfied in their roles, and they're going to be the next engineers for the next 20 or 30 years as well. And continue to retain staff is a huge barrier. We see that not just in industrial applications, but also logistics operations, even in retail environments, right, where you have things like electronic shelf labels helping to reduce the burden on personnel as well, particularly as they're becoming more important to some of these digitization trends, and then maybe enable them to be doing things that are a bit more either important to the customer or the wider facility, and not necessarily bogged down in manual tasks that are kind of repetitive and can be better spent elsewhere as well, if that makes sense.
Speaking of manual tasks that can be repetitive and things like that, many of the people who we've talked to in this series have spoken about what they call kind of hidden workflows inside factories and supply chains. And they've kind of shared their perspective on how those surface and the impacts that they have. From a research standpoint, where do you see inefficiencies quietly compounding into larger productivity problems?
It's a great question. I think, as you said, I think what a lot of people do when it comes to asset visibility deployments in particular, they typically start with one kind of pilot area where they're trying to focus or solve a very specific problem. But then what happens is if you solve that issue, sometimes the asset that you're tracking or the item that you're trying to see, then you figure out that the actual source of the problem is coming as something altogether different, right? So it could be a forklift is being held up by some sort of crowding in the facility. It could be personnel are being diverted to the wrong location and they don't have visibility of what their next task may be. It could be they're using the wrong materials or they can't identify the materials. But until you have that initial deployment and visibility, it's quite hard to just predict what the overall outcome is going to be, which is why it's so important. And I think we see a lot of trials and pilot studies, but testing things out and deploying these technologies will reveal a whole host of new areas in which the whole facility can improve upon. I think that's only going to compound as you integrate that into your wider record management systems, compliance capabilities, the whole MES, manufacturing execution systems, everything else on top of that. Those are extremely important to enhancing the visibility and the role of edge AI and AI in general, of course, help ensure that take advantage of new techniques in machine learning to automate some of these processes and widen that visibility to something that maybe was kind of manually managed and identified by one person as an issue to the wider or entire facility or entire supply chain monitoring capabilities as well, where there may be one bottleneck in one area which is really severely disrupting another, but you may not know about that at all until you deploy in the first place.
That all kind of speaks to the need for a versatile technology solution, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But you also talk to technology providers and their customers. What's keeping them up at night, and where are they focusing to try to make the biggest difference? Where do they see the most value and potential?
Yeah, I think there's a few key areas, right? I think the first one I mentioned was the kind of asset visibility or visibility of operations more broadly. And that could include, obviously, a lot of different things within the warehouse environments, within logistics environments. It could be staff and personnel, of course, or it could be the whole end-to-end kind of supply chain tracking as well. And I think, knowing where things are, but also knowing the context in where they are as well, knowing what your personnel are doing, and knowing how they're interacting with objects is obviously extremely critical as well for improving worker safety and the compliance things that I mentioned. So I think those things are really key. And if you don't have that visibility in the first place, it's challenging, right? Because people don't always know what assets they have. We've come across RTLS deployments where they discover that they've suddenly got an extra 30 or 40 different forklifts that are obviously really expensive, that are underutilized or not utilized at all. So it's a lot of the kind of RTLS and asset tracking and the visibility aspects are not just solving one problem, but identifying new problems. And a lot of people just don't know what the problems are in the first place. That's one thing we found. You probably found with some of the discussions with the RTLS vendors, they often come to the industry and these guys don't know what the issue is. So it's hard to then justify or calculate the ROI until it's deployed and until these things get pieced together. So again, as you enhance that visibility, as you deploy these previous objects that haven't been tracked, you can do lots of different things. You can optimize the facility, in terms of layout and everything else that's happening there to streamline processes and remove any bottlenecks, right? You can find lost items more readily. You can understand or retrain personnel to other areas as well, potentially to better educate them on how to deliver enhanced efficiency as well. So there's so many different things that can be driven that not only result in things like reduced search times, but obviously you can maybe ship more items over the course of a period as well. So clear ROI in terms of the amount of orders you can process on top of that as well, which can obviously streamline the return on investment across the board.
From a research perspective, where is wireless connectivity having the most measurable impact on industrial productivity today?
Yeah, so it's a great question again. So I think with regards to wireless technologies in industrial facilities, I think obviously historically there has been some fear around adopting wireless technology. Obviously everything was trended towards cable, but in terms of what you can do with enabling assets that have previously not been connected before, or being able to track different items, or being able to equip machinery with condition-based monitoring applications as well, these all require wireless. And I think another key point is that yes, there may be a case where you have a completely greenfield site and everything can be optimized, but there's a huge market opportunity for retrofit solutions where wireless plays a very important role within the industry. And it's not just, for example, asset tracking, it's also enhancing the flexibility of the workers. Remote operation is obviously very critical to different environments. So there's a combination of the enhanced visibility aspect, there's the reducing of downtime through operational maintenance, condition-based monitoring, sensorization of different assets. And then you have the kind of material workflow capabilities where you can track what people are doing. Is there a better way to improve the process and do it in a safer manner? All of that requires the flexibility of wireless technologies in industrial environments, or even logistics in supply chain. So until, again, you can't wire everything, right? An industrial site, you can't have the downtime as well. So you can really then scale up the number of assets that you're monitoring when it comes to wireless technology. And this is why we see so much investment in digitalization through obviously Bluetooth, but other technologies in this space as well.
In your research, how often does connectivity show up as a bottleneck?
Yeah, so I think enabling all these things to be connected is a huge challenge. There is obviously these environments, these industrial environments, warehouse environments, they can be very difficult sometimes for wireless technologies to be deployed. And again, that's partly perhaps some of that reason for the hesitance in sometimes, or historically, in adopting wireless technologies. But I think what it can enable from, again, a visibility perspective, enabling things, concepts like edge AI, because edge AI is great, but all these items in these sites need to be connected, right? If you're going to have this distributed intelligence across the board. So, there are challenges, or there have been challenges in terms of, or the perception of reliability of wireless technologies in this space. But I think the value that they give is so worthwhile in terms of the transformation that is being enabled, that they will be critical going forward. And we see, huge investments in wireless technologies for different things like machine sensorization. Obviously, we discussed briefly RTLS and asset tracking capabilities. These are wireless is fundamental to those. As I said, you can't enable everything to be connected through a cable, But there are, obviously challenges within that. You need to have technologies that are secure, that are versatile, that are reliable, that can operate over extended ranges. Because, when it comes to industrial, efficiency and productivity, there are so many different applications within that sector that need to be connected, and so many end devices need to be connected. There is never going to be a one-size-fits-all technology, but what you need to have is some baseline, capabilities of that technology, and versatility when it comes to range, when it comes to reliability, security, robustness, performance in these different environments, cost, of course. If you're going to be talking about thousands of different assets, power consumption for battery powered enabled, or even ambient IoT type applications as well. And then we get to supply chain. You're talking about passive, even tags and stickers for enhanced visibility in that as well. So those are all things that wired technologies can't do. It's important that wireless continues to innovate on different metrics, but we definitely see wireless technologies as fundamental. So yes, there may be challenges, and there may be a perception that wireless doesn't always solve every problem, but the value that you can generate from the transition to digitalization and enhanced visibility is clear, and it's been established, and wireless deployments have been within factories, logistical sites for many years, and we expect it to grow rapidly in the years to come as well.
And to that point, have you started to see evidence that wireless visibility is really moving from that nice to have to a baseline expectation of operations?
Absolutely, and I think I don't want to talk about edge AI all the time. I know we want to talk about connectivity as well, but I think, as I said, if you want to have intelligence and not just monitoring, right? So if you want to have decision making, true decision making, what you need is a much wider range of devices to be connected and to have that intelligence at the edge. Not every single device can connect to the cloud with ultra low latency and high throughput capabilities. And to be honest, not every enterprise wants to share everything with the cloud, necessarily, right? For privacy purposes and security purposes, and of course latency purposes. So what we're seeing now is a broader trend in industry is the shift towards edge AI, where you have intelligence and inference on the device. The whatever it is, whether it's a Bluetooth sensor, can determine a problem well in advance. Therefore, you're not waiting necessarily or continually connecting to the cloud. You can optimize for power consumption. You can optimize for security. You can optimize for latency because it's being made on the device and only share when you need to. So all of that can really enable a much wider range of assets that have previously not been connected to be connected for the first time. And it doesn't have to be, really expensive machinery or assets. It could be, a pump or a valve or something in a facility, which if that breaks or goes wrong, or a bearing goes wrong, if you listen to the vibrations and things like that, those things go wrong, you have disastrous consequences. And I think the shift is definitely much more towards edge intelligence, towards more proactive rather than reactive capabilities as well, because if you have any downtime, you've already kind of lost the battle, right, to a certain extent. And I think that's a key issue. It can cost thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars, right, depending on the production site, if you have a few hours of downtime. So if you can reduce that, if you can preempt that capability with the visibility of condition-based monitoring, industrial sensors, then the value is clearly going to be recognized.
It's funny. I was just about to comment that we've made it so long through the discussion, and those two letters AI hadn't come up yet. So I'm glad that you worked it in. We're now hype compliant. So
exactly. But I think honestly, to that point though, I do think that obviously a lot of the initial hype around AI has been around generative AI and things like that. Obviously the different language models and everything else there. But I think that what we are really seeing now, and we see that with recent announcements, the shift towards edge AI is becoming extremely important. And Bluetooth obviously has a vital role to play in that, particularly when you're talking about the ambient or very low power devices where they can't be monitored before. So, nobody wants to, go and charge different devices or have to recharge sensors. It would be too costly on maintenance. So if you can have these kind of ambient IoT solutions, which also have a level of intelligence, that really scales up what we talk about as the AI concept of today. And it's really important to be able to do that and move from the kind of reactive towards decision-centric, approaches.